He toasted my life's work with a smile I taught him to wear, then reached across the table to end me. The security guard leaned in and whispered, "I saw your son tip a vial to your glass." In that breath, 40 years of fatherhood cracked like thin ice. Love turned into leverage, legacy into a target, and I learned that the most painful betrayals don't shout. They sign the bill, wipe their lips, and ask if you're okay. I didn't throw the drink. I folded the tainted napkin into my pocket like a heartbeat, chose evidence over outrage, and walked out to build a quiet war. Chemistry first, law second, mercy last. This isn't a story about a fortune stolen, it's about a father who refused to let revenge write his ending, and a legacy rebuilt where the cameras don't look. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're tuning in from. We love seeing how our stories connect people from all around the world. Your comments and thoughts bring this community to life, and we're so grateful to have you on this journey with us. If you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now grab a cozy seat, maybe a cup of coffee or tea, and prepare yourself for a tale that will captivate your heart from beginning to end. Let's begin. I was 68 the night Seattle stopped sounding like rain and started sounding like silverware. Pike Place Market glowed like a chain of lanterns, and the bricks of Post Alley shone as if the city had been polished by hand. In my briefcase, the sale papers for Cascade Care Works still held a faint warmth. 40 years of stubborn code, midnight rescues, and promises to families had been traded to people who say, "Scale more than care." I told my cardiologist I would celebrate with tea, not bourbon. So I ordered blackberry iced tea and watched the ice breathe inside the glass. Evan arrived scented like a department store. Maya half a step behind with that smile that listens for cameras. They looked beautiful the way billboards are beautiful. Perfect until you stand close enough to see the staples. We hugged as colleagues who might deserve a short write-up. My son scanned the room as a broker inspects a view. Light, angles, leverage. He has my height and his mother's cheekbones, and a hunger that belongs only to him. Pride and caution wrestled in me. Pride lost a little ground. We talked about the deal. He called it visionary. She called it a masterclass. Compliments crossed the table like well-dressed birds. I let them pass. In my head, I was back with routers blinking at 2 a.m., with a payroll met at 11:58, with the season when one bad release could have ended us. I thought of June, who never asked me to quit or to win, only to come home with gentleness. Her photo rides in my wallet, thin as a prayer card. Evan lifted his glass. "To the next chapter, Dad." Maya added, "You earned every bit of it." I touched the rim to mine and let the sound stand in for words. I kept my hand around the glass and let the cold instruct me. Once bourbon lived where the tea now lived. The doctor said my heart is strong but impressionable. "Don't swagger on it," he said. I promised him and I promised June. The promise sat between us like a reserved place setting. Evan asked what I would do with time. Road trips? A boat? Maya said, "A foundation," in a voice that sounded investment grade. I watched the server glide through the room as if gravity were an opinion. Practice had made me polite. "We'll see," I said. The words floated like a neutral balloon, useful mostly for keeping other words from crowding in. Evan grinned. "Think bigger." Seattle gave up its rain for light. It slid across Maya's cheekbones like holiday glass. She laughed and touched Evan's sleeve. He pats the table when he is proud. He was drumming now, a soft rhythm like a wristwatch you cannot ignore. The more he said legacy, the more the syllables felt like a knife turned flat. For him, legacy means access. For me, it now means editing, removing what does not deserve to outlast me. I told them about June's pottery class in Ballard, how she loved Clay's patience and the way heat settles what hands guess. Maya said that was sweet. Evan said perhaps we could brand a program. I smiled and let the idea drift. Under the table, my knee clicked and the ache agreed to be quiet. Around us, Post Alley breathed. A violin threaded the room, the smell of oysters met coffee, and somewhere a dishwasher laughed. I love rooms where people don't raise their voices. It means money, but control most of all. I tried to set my heartbeat to that tempo. When the appetizers were cleared, Maya asked to step outside under the string lights. "Golden hour lasts 3 minutes," she said. Evan stood, smoothing lapels he never fills. I watched them go, silhouettes in the doorway. Noticing exits likely saved the company more than once. It may yet save something else. Evan glanced back. Back in a flash. Alone with the tea, I stirred the ice and listened for what the glass might say. Victory feels different now. Less trumpet, more tuning fork. You hold it to the bone and decide if the vibration is true. I looked for the boy who slept in server rooms under hoodies and believed a screwdriver and a deadline could fix anything. In his place stands a man who likes reflections. I signed the check for oysters and slid the pen back into the leather folder with satisfaction. Outside, the alley brightened as though someone had dialed the city up a notch. I took June's photo from my wallet, pressed my thumb to the paper, and breathed. All evening I had carried a worry the size of a coin, nothing you can see with an open palm, everything you can feel when a hand makes a fist. The server paused. "Anything else?" "Just the check," I said. They returned with cheeks warmed by the last of the light, and the room found its rhythm again. We drifted toward the main course as if nothing were waiting beneath it. I smiled and kept my palm open on the linen. The tea had warmed a little. I lifted it and let the glass touch my lip without drinking. Somewhere inside, the coin turned and clicked once, like a key trying a lock it almost recognizes. I whispered, "Not yet." Dinner had one more beat left for me alone. The violinist tied the room with one long note. Talk fell into a bought hush. Evan and Maya stood outside under fairy lights, harvesting the last gold for her feed. I drew the blackberry iced wool closer and watched condensation brighten the glass. It looked harmless, the way a frozen pond looks harmless. Polished, inviting, and wrong if you trust it with both feet. Owen McCready arrived as if the floor had sent him. He stopped a half step behind my shoulder, posture squared, eyes steady. His voice reached just my ear. "Mr. Quinn, forgive the interruption. I saw your son hold a small brown vial to your glass when he returned." 16 plain words, no adjectives, no theater. He had the calm of men who file statements and never inflate nouns. My heart misfired once, then remembered its job. 40 years in healthcare software left one reflex worth keeping. Don't react, execute. I laid the linen napkin over the rim as if blotting condensation, then performed the sort of clumsy flourish people forgive older men for. A fingertip nudged the base, the glass tipped into the cloth. Tea sighed, purple deepened to bruise, and ice rang as it skittered onto the bread plate. A server appeared. "So sorry, another napkin?" "Please," I said. I lifted the wet linen with 2 fingers and folded the stain inward, once, twice, 3 times into a compact, heavy parcel. Liquid makes evidence feel like evidence. I slid the bundle into the inside pocket where my wallet usually rides. Cold touched rib. Chain of custody begins with not letting go. The server replaced my napkin and whisked away the glass. I dabbed the tablecloth and didn't look at the doorway. They returned smiling. Evan's eyes scanned the tabletop like a broker skimming a prospectus. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I said. Stomach went sideways. "I'll head out early." Maya's hand hovered near my chair. "We can drive you." "No need," I told her. "I've called a ride." 4 short lines, enough lumber to build a door. The check landed. I signed, tipped, and stood with the careful slowness I save 4 days when my chest holds opinions. At the threshold, Post Alley inhaled brine and cold. The bricks held light like old leather holds polish. I kept my right hand on the inside pocket, not as theater but as instruction. Evan patted my shoulder. "Get some rest, Dad." A bland stamp, inkless and still it marks. We smiled the way people do when rooms are watching. The ride share nosed to the curb with my name on its screen. I took the back seat and watched the driver check his mirror twice. We slid down First Avenue past windows selling salmon and glass. I scrolled to a number Tara Feld gave me years ago, a private diagnostics lab that keeps its lobby empty and its reports encrypted. I built an email of nouns and times, requested rush toxicology on cloth swab from beverage spill, and saved the draft. I did not call the police. The decision arrived quieter than a breath. Police make reports, reports make headlines, headlines become knives strangers swing. June does not become a hashtag arguing at midnight. The first job is not punishment, it is proof. Proof is quiet. Proof stands when your knees don't. Heat from the floor vent pooled at my shins and persuaded the napkin to share a degree. I touched the pocket and felt density more than damp, weight more than stain. I pictured a fluorescent counter, a labeled bag, boxes on a form, hungry for check marks. Outside, a couple laughed, a bus sighed. The city kept making its private movies. I declined my cameo. The cardiologist's line replayed, "Don't swagger on your heart." Tonight, that meant walking past loud impulses. No confrontation, no speech, no shaking a sun until answers fell out. Closure is for files. Living people deserve verification. I exhaled for 4, inhaled for 4, and let breath set the metronome fear refused to be. We turned onto a faster street and the lights pulled into thread. I dictated a short note to Tara. Guard statement, napkin secured, lab requested, dawn availability. I put the phone face down and watched the city spool by. One action at a time. Lift, fold, pocket, leave, verify. That was the sermon. The driver glanced up. "You okay back there?" "Yes," I said, true in the smallest sense. I rolled June's photo between my fingers and felt the softened edge of paper returned 100 times. "Almost home," he said. We turned toward my block and the tires wrote a wet sentence along the curb. We stopped before the house I have kept more carefully than I kept myself. I waited for the receipt to ping, then stepped into air faint with cedar. My pocket weighed more than cloth. Some nights I carried a company. Tonight I carried a napkin. Both loads asked the same thing, finish what you start. I unlocked the door, set the briefcase down, opened the email, and pressed send. The subject line held the only drama I allowed. Rush talks, beverage napkin, chain started, client waiting. Before sunrise, the house had the careful quiet of a museum, and my phone disturbed it like a cough in a chapel. The subject line on the encrypted email was all edges. Rush talks. Results available. I set the device on the kitchen island and switched on the cool overheads. Stainless steel, white tile, a cutting board that once knew peaches. The domestic scene made a reasonable imitation of a lab. My hands rested flat until the heartbeat in my wrists agreed to behave. Then I opened the file. The summary sat at the top like a verdict that didn't need a gavel. Propranolol present at high concentration. Quantitative estimates explained in parenthesis. Chain of custody tracking the moment the napkin left my pocket and entered their custody. Each scan a breadcrumb. Beneath the paragraph, clinical language translated into ordinary risk. With my cardiac history, ingestion could impersonate a natural event. It wasn't melodramatic. It didn't need to be. Chemistry prefers proof to awe, and proof is what I asked for. I leaned on the counter and listened to the slow appliances of an old house. The refrigerator's motor came up like a tone clearing its throat. Out the window, the sky hung in the color of unfinished metal. I put the phone down and placed both palms on the island as if bracing a stretcher. A single exhale settled the chatter inside my ribs. The body argued for panic, the mind chose procedure. We've shipped bad builds at 2 in the morning and backed them out by 4. This had that cadence. Don't dramatize, document. I called Tara. The line clicked once and found her voice alert, not rushed. "We don't do long preambles." "Public or private?" she asked. "Private," I said. "Proof, then consequence." She breathed once, satisfied. 3 pillars, she said. Chemistry, finances, intent. I repeated them like a nurse repeats orders. She wanted duplicates of the tox report in a separate vault, a copy for counsel, the napkin's transfer affidavit when it posted. For finance, she would dispatch the team with appetites for ugly ledgers, revolving credit, UCC filings, liens dressed as partnerships. For intent, we would chase the light on access logs, devices, the clinic's audit trails, anyone in a white coat who couldn't stop selling themselves. We were done in 4 minutes. That's how long it takes to give a plan a spine. I hung up and poured hot water over an unambitious tea bag, watched steam draft across the under-cabinet lights. The cup warmed my hand without rewarding it. I opened my notebook and wrote 3 headings that matched Tara's pillars. Under chemistry, I wrote napkin, lab duplicates, custody forms. Under finances, credit bureau pulls, fintech trail, lifestyle burn rate. Under intent, EHR audit, contact chains, any insurance riders. 3 borders around 1 truth. The phone rang again, Evan right on cue. I let it hum 4 times to make space for an old man's fiction. His voice came wrapped in concern that had practiced in a mirror. He wanted to know if I'd seen a doctor, if the episode had been serious. I gave the answer built for caring sons and opportunists alike. Indigestion, I said. I'll avoid the sour things. His sigh came through the speaker like a curtain slackening. I added the line I needed planted. I'm talking with counsel about a family trust. The sale complicates things. I kept my tone unadorned. Good, he said, and the word worked too hard. Good shouldn't pant. I called Tara. The line clicked once and found her voice alert, not rushed. We don't do long preambles. Public or private, she asked. Private, I said. Proof, then consequence. She breathed once, satisfied. 3 pillars, she said. Chemistry, finances, intent. I repeated them like a nurse repeats orders. She wanted duplicates of the tox report in a separate vault, a copy for counsel, the napkin's transfer affidavit when it posted. For finance, she would dispatch the team with appetites for ugly ledgers, revolving credit, UCC filings, liens dressed as partnerships. For intent, we would chase the light on access logs, devices, the clinic's audit trails, anyone in a white coat who couldn't stop selling themselves. We were done in 4 minutes. That's how long it takes to give a plan a spine. I hung up and poured hot water over an unambitious tea bag, watched steam draft across the under-cabinet lights. The cup warmed my hand without rewarding it. I opened my notebook and wrote 3 headings that matched Tara's pillars. Under chemistry, I wrote napkin, lab duplicates, custody forms. Under finances, credit bureau pulls, fintech trail, lifestyle burn rate. Under intent, EHR audit, contact chains, any insurance riders. 3 borders around 1 truth. The phone rang again, Evan right on cue. I let it hum 4 times to make space for an old man's fiction. His voice came wrapped in concern that had practiced in a mirror. He wanted to know if I'd seen a doctor, if the episode had been serious. I gave the answer built for caring sons and opportunists alike. Indigestion, I said. I'll avoid the sour things. His sigh came through the speaker like a curtain slackening. I added the line I needed planted. I'm talking with counsel about a family trust. The sale complicates things. I kept my tone unadorned. Good, he said, and the word worked too hard. Good shouldn't pant. Upstairs, the kitchen turned to lab again. I cleared a square of counter, set a clean laptop on an anti-static mat, and pulled on nitrile gloves as if I were about to graft a vein. The envelope opened with a precise rip. The micro SD card looked as innocent as a freckle, which is how devices win. I slotted it, disabled Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and launched a viewer I kept for dull company emergencies. The video greeted me with the small wobble of a chest mount and the thin hiss of a microphone hearing too much room. Post Alley returned, the string lights coaxing reflections out of brick, the doorways squared like frames. He had been facing the host stand when the clip caught Evan angling into view. Shoulder canted in, wrist low. A brown vial rode his fingers like a coin trick practiced smug. He kissed the vial to the rim of my blackberry tea and pocketed the bottle with a waiter's efficiency. Off-screen, Maya's voice floated, rehearsed and bright. Hurry, the light's perfect. The camera's field skated as Owen turned. It was only a second, and it was the kind of second that sums a life the wrong way. I slid the playhead back, slowed it, stepped frame by frame until the meniscus of the T trembled around glass. Freeze. I captured the frame and wrote the time code on paper as if ink could solder the moment to the desk. I ran hash sums on the raw file and the still printed the values, then duplicated the media to 2 encrypted drives labeled with dates and the kind of calm handwriting I use for hard truths. The card went into a tamper-evident sleeve. The sleeve went into a pouch that could survive clumsy hands and a small flood. I logged the chain like a priest recites names. Device, origin, handler, time. I called Tara and gave her the headline in fewer words than a billboard. Visual corroboration, I said. Body cam shows vial to rim. I have hashes and stills. She didn't thrill, and she didn't sigh. Good. We'll notarize Owen, vault the media, and set escrow triggers, she said. The rest was logistics, courier to the firm, receipt protocols, and evidence ledger number that will never mean anything to anyone but us. We ended the call with the same restraint we began it. Justice sometimes needs adjectives. Evidence does not. Her next text arrived before the kettle settled. Early finance pings, she wrote. Maya listed as ambassador on a fintech campaign, a short-term withdrawal by Evan matched with timestamps we cared about. Ad buys for a studio that believed in glamour more than arithmetic. Signals, no conclusions. I underlined the last phrase in my notebook. We collect signals. Conclusions come when they invite themselves. Keeping the ruse alive felt like balancing a glass on a knife. I sent Evan a short message about counsel assembling the first draft of a family trust, a line about wanting to keep things simple and clean for everyone. He answered with the soft relief of someone who just found their keys. Great to hear, he wrote. 2 words, a tell. I filed his relief as data, not comfort. In the morning, I invited him to Lake Washington. We used to troll for cutthroat trout in a boat that coughed like an old smoker and smelled like life jackets and gasoline. He said yes in under a minute. Dawn at the marina put a thin frost on the dock ropes and a pale coat of quiet on the water. We idled out past the boats with their canvas eyelids and let the hull write a small wake on the slate surface. Mist lived low, as if the city were practicing disappearing. We didn't fill the air. That was the point. I asked after work, the house, how the car handled winter streets. He answered in paragraph fragments that were carefully normal. When I steered the talk toward annual physicals and cardio meds, a tremor flirted with his index finger on the reel handle. When the word trust appeared, eagerness shortened his breath a half step. I didn't tune for guilt. I tuned for rhythm. People reveal time signatures before they reveal motives. We watched a pair of gulls map circles over the channel markers. He offered to help with errands later. I thanked him and set the lure again. Halfway across the lake, a buzz in my pocket. Tara. I angled the screen away from wind and sun, an image of a policy page, a note in clean counsel shorthand. New life insurance rider, beneficiary. Maya, effective 3 months ago, enhanced payout for cardiac death. I let the phone sleep and studied the water as if it had volunteered proof. Timing is another kind of fingerprint. I logged nothing out loud, only the sky and where the sun would be when this kind of morning turned into noon. Back home, I wrote the outing in my notebook like a field report. Location, conditions, topics, reactions. No mind reading, only observable things. I duplicated the bodycam archive again and added the new hash values to the printed sheet, then filed the microSD in the safe with the napkins lab report behind a fireproof door. Paper rustled like a small verdict. The ache of playing kind father stayed with me as a shoulder weight you don't massage because you need the reminder. Dignity can be a tool if you keep it sharpened. Sentiment dulls at first. I made coffee I didn't need, washed the cup I didn't drink from, and set it upside down on a towel as if doing something small correctly could carry the weight of the large. June's photo leaned against a jar of wooden spoons. She had disapproved of shortcuts and grandstanding in equal measure. She would have approved of lists. By afternoon, Tara's calendar invites stacked into a quiet ladder: clinic audit logs, compliance contact, Owen's declaration appointment. I confirmed a courier for the card and printed a fresh chain page to travel with it. The plan's spine felt sturdy enough to carry the day. I ended my notes with the line that had been forming since the alley. When proof assembles itself, it asks to be used. Evening drifted down the sound. I set the still frame of the vial at the rim beside a strip of paper that held hash values, and next to both I placed a reminder for the morning: doctor's disciplinary record, clinic access timestamps. The screen dimmed on its own, as if screens know when justice needs sleep. I turned off the light and let the house be a house again, a quiet box where evidence could rest until it was called to speak. Morning threaded rain across the window in thin, repeatable lines, the kind a draftsman would draw when asked for patience. My desk looked like a well-behaved server rack, neat cables of paper clips, legal pads aligned, evidence pouches stacked with a surgeon's affection for order. Tara's emails began arriving in dignified intervals, each one a bead on a wire, pulling the picture tight. The first memorandum caged the money: revolving lines, short-term draws, penalties disguised as convenience. The total massed where math likes to huddle: between 1.8 and 1.9 million, an ecosystem of balances that needed noise to survive. A graph mapped the studio's ad spend and live stream costs against declared income. The lines pretended to shake hands and failed. One entry marked by the investigators with a green flag caught my attention: a short, expensive draw from a fintech product the week my stomach episode was supposed to be my obituary. I wrote the date on a yellow tab and slid it into the finances folder. Motive always believes it is subtle until you give it a ruler. The second packet opened the clinic door. A compliance contact, kept nameless on purpose, confirmed the electronic health record audit log showed an assistant's account accessing my cardiac file within the last 3 months. Timestamps lined up with the fintech draw and something else: the day a new insurance rider went live. The doctor attached to the clinic had a prior disciplinary warning, small print about beta blockers and care plans that looked like templates. The warning wasn't a verdict, but it was a shadow the right size. Tara queued preservation letters so no one could clean a server at midnight and call it spring. Insurance arrived as a tidy PDF. A rider naming Maya as beneficiary, effective 3 months ago, premiums routed through an account with Evan's name on the checks. The language for enhanced payout in the event of a cardiac death sat on the page without shame, black ink in a neat font. Insurance is not a confession, it is a lens. I marked the date, slid a copy under intent/EHR, and breathed through the iron taste climbing the back of my mouth. Then came the part that didn't fit in a ledger: June's ceramics. A transcript from a phone call and 2 emails, cheerful with exclamation points spelling out a charity gathering built from her bowls and vases. The organizer, Maya, proposed a 30% fee in exchange for access and exclusive rights. The gallery asked for provenance. Maya supplied it with my house like a warehouse location. I held the pages and felt the same ache I do when I pass the kiln, still warm from other people's courage. Clay remembers touch. It despises being counted. I placed those pages in a folder labeled Desecration and laid June's photograph on top of them as if paper could apologize. I needed air. Alki Beach kept its promise of wind and gulls and a freight horn somewhere doing work honestly. I walked until the rain shifted from arithmetic to mist. Anger, left to itself, tries to be gasoline. I made it be solder. The water threw back a flat, patient face. It said, proof first, then consequence. I said it with it, the way 2 people in a pew share a hymn book. Resolve isn't loud, it clips its nails and shows up. Back at the desk, Evan called. His voice had a softness he builds when he wants to borrow the room. We might be pregnant, he said. The sentence looked airbrushed. I let silence do its job and then gave him what etiquette requires. "I hope you're both healthy," I said. "Keep me posted." He lingered for a hook that wasn't there. "We should talk trust," he added. "Soon." "We will," I said. New life is not a bleach. It does not lift old intent from fabric already set. Tara and I began assembling the arsenal. 4 folders, blue for no reason except the dignity of simple colors. Chemistry held the toxicology report, chain of custody forms, and the body cam stills that turned a second into a photograph you can't unsee. Finances gathered the debt consolidation, the fintech timing, the studio's spin mapped against the reality it refused to acknowledge. Desecration carried the gallery correspondence, the fee clause, and photographs of June's work taken without love. Intent/EHR thickened with audit log exports, a summary of the doctor's disciplinary note, and the insurance rider in its correct order. I logged each edition with a date and a signature, not because I distrusted my memory, but because memory is a bad witness when the heart has to testify. We locked the master set in the firm's vault and kept a working set at home, each tab labeled with the kind of handwriting teachers use to reward. The act of labeling calmed me. It was not vindication, it was furniture. I scheduled a courier for authenticated copies and printed a fresh chain page to travel with the MSDRO. Paper makes a better sound when it means something. Ethics remained the frame. No public police action yet, no headlines. I would rather June's name live on the back of a student's first good bowl than on a pane of television glass. Private, lawful, surgical, that was the route. If the path narrows to the criminal courts later, it will be because they chose it, not because I enjoyed the walk. Night folded itself over the sound, one neat edge at a time. I balanced the 4 folders at the center of the desk until their corners agreed. A calendar ping confirmed the conference room at the Fairmont Olympic, the kind of room where wood glows like confidence. I rehearsed one opening sentence in my head, a line as plain as arithmetic, and left it there to sharpen while I slept. Before I turned off the light, I moved June's photograph from the desecration folder to the top of the stack. The picture did not need to guard anything. I did. Morning threaded rain across the window in thin, repeatable lines, the kind a draftsman would draw when asked for patience. My desk looked like a well-behaved server rack, neat cables of paper clips, legal pads aligned, evidence pouches stacked with a surgeon's affection for order. Tara's emails began arriving in dignified intervals, each one a bead on a wire pulling the picture tight. The first memorandum caged the money, revolving lines, short-term draws, penalties disguised as convenience. The total massed where math likes to huddle, between 1.8 and 1.9 million, an ecosystem of balances that needed noise to survive. A graph mapped the studio's ad spend and live stream costs against declared income. The lines pretended to shake hands and failed. One entry marked by the investigators with a green flag caught my attention. A short, expensive draw from a fintech product the week my stomach episode was supposed to be my obituary. I wrote the date on a yellow tab and slid it into the finances folder. Motive always believes it is subtle until you give it a ruler. The second packet opened the clinic door. A compliance contact, kept nameless on purpose, confirmed the electronic health record audit logs showed an assistant's account accessing my cardiac file within the last 3 months. Timestamps lined up with the fintech draw and something else. The day a new insurance rider went live. The doctor attached to the clinic had a prior disciplinary warning, small print about beta blockers and care plans that looked like templates. The warning wasn't a verdict, but it was a shadow the right size. Tara queued preservation letters so no one could clean a server at midnight and call it spring. Insurance arrived as a tidy PDF. A writer naming Maya as beneficiary, effective 3 months ago, premiums routed through an account with Evan's name on the checks. The language for enhanced payout in the event of a cardiac death sat on the page without shame, black ink in a neat font. Insurance is not a confession, it is a lens. I marked the date, slid a copy under intent/EEHR, and breathed through the iron taste climbing the back of my mouth. Then came the part that didn't fit in a ledger. June's ceramics. A transcript from a phone call and 2 emails, cheerful with exclamation points, spelling out a charity gathering built from her bowls and vases. The organizer, Maya, proposed a 30% fee in exchange for access and exclusive rights. The gallery asked for provenance. Maya supplied it with my house like a warehouse location. I held the pages and felt the same ache I do when I pass the kiln, still warm from other people's courage. Clay remembers touch. It despises being counted. I placed those pages in a folder labeled Desecration and laid June's photograph on top of them as if paper could apologize. I needed air. Alki Beach kept its promise of wind and gulls and a freight horn somewhere doing work honestly. I walked until the rain shifted from arithmetic to mist. Anger, left to itself, tries to be gasoline. I made it be solder. The water threw back a flat, patient face. It said, proof first, then consequence. I said it with it, the way 2 people in a pew share a hymn book. Resolve isn't loud, it clips its nails and shows up. Back at the desk, Evan called. His voice had a softness he builds when he wants to borrow the room. We might be pregnant, he said. The sentence looked airbrushed. I let silence do its job and then gave him what etiquette requires. I hope you're both healthy, I said. Keep me posted. He lingered for a hook that wasn't there. We should talk trust, he added. Soon. We will, I said. New life is not a bleach. It does not lift old intent from fabric already set. Tara and I began assembling the arsenal. 4 folders, blue for no reason except the dignity of simple colors. Chemistry held the toxicology report, chain of custody forms, and the body cam stills that turned a second into a photograph you can't unsee. Finances gathered the debt consolidation, the fintech timing, the studio's spend mapped against the reality it refused to acknowledge. Desecration carried the gallery correspondence, the fee clause, and photographs of June's work taken without love. Intent/EHR thickened with audit log exports, a summary of the doctor's disciplinary note, and the insurance rider in its correct order. I logged each edition with a date and a signature, not because I distrusted my memory, but because memory is a bad witness when the heart has to testify. We locked the master set in the firm's vault and kept a working set at home, each tab labeled with the kind of handwriting teachers used to reward. The act of labeling calmed me. It was not vindication, it was furniture. I scheduled a courier for authenticated copies and printed a fresh chain page to travel with the MSDRO. Paper makes a better sound when it means something. Ethics remain the frame. No public police action yet, no headlines. I would rather June's name live on the back of a student's first good bowl than on a pane of television glass. Private, lawful, surgical. That was the route. If the path narrows to the criminal courts later, it will be because they chose it, not because I enjoyed the walk. Night folded itself over the sound, one neat edge at a time. I balanced the 4 folders at the center of the desk until their corners agreed. A calendar ping confirmed the conference room at the Fairmont Olympic, the kind of room where wood glows like confidence. I rehearsed one opening sentence in my head, a line as plain as arithmetic, and left it there to sharpen while I slept. Before I turned off the light, I moved June's photograph from the desecration folder to the top of the stack. The picture did not need to guard anything. I did. Dawn laid a wet vellum over Seattle and my phone began clattering like a careless typist. Notifications stacked into a staircase. I sat at the kitchen table with coffee cooling toward irrelevance and opened the first post. Maya's face bloomed large, contrite light in soft piano, captions floating like tissue, a controlling father, an inheritance withheld, a legacy stolen. She cut in photos from dinners, cropped hands to look possessive, slowed footage of Evan smiling like devotion. The piece never stated, only implied, which is how a rumor graduates to a myth. Hashtags gathered like gulls at a pier. The algorithm ate well. I set the phone face down, counted 4 in and 4 out, and let breath sand the edges of whatever the body wanted to do next. Anger loves speed. I gave it the one thing it can't metabolize. The house kept its practical hum. June's photograph leaned against the bread box. I told the picture nothing. Principle, not impulse. I wrote on a sticky and stuck it to the rim of my screen. The Foundation's charter sat in the safe. The evidence packet slept in escrow. We had chosen our lane when the air was cooler. We would stay in it now. Tara answered on the first ring. Her voice carried triage without panic. We would not sue for defamation this morning. We would document and archive. URLs, timestamps, hashes, downloads, saved to cold storage. We would activate the comms drip we drafted for bad weather. No attacks, no rebuttals, no family theater. A quiet update would go live from the June Quinn Foundation, youth elder wheel classes at the studio, wildlife microgrants for Puget Sound researchers, a calendar for Bainbridge volunteer days. A short note would reach their counsel reminding them of the no-contact clause and the escrow trigger, breach it, and the packet walks itself to the prosecutor. Mercy would remain policy, not a mood. By mid-morning, the smear swelled. Reaction videos sprouted like mushrooms after a warm rain. People filmed themselves frowning at captions and declaring the obvious, which is never obvious when a camera blinks. Someone overlaid my name on stock footage of a gavel. Strangers demanded accountability as if the word itself rearranged facts. I watched as a physician watches a fever chart, interested in the slope more than the theatrics at any given hour. I took screenshots until my thumb tightened, and then I put the device to sleep. Owen texted that he had lodged his body cam and sworn statement under seal at SPD. No fireworks, no declarations, just a receipt number and a period. Men like that make a city survivable. I typed thank you and deleted it, then typed it again and sent it. There are thanks that belong in writing. He replied with nothing, which felt correct. By afternoon, a neighborhood paper ran a small, square article about the Foundation's launch. 2 seniors at a wheel station smiling with clay on their wrists, a freshman holding a biscuit bowl like a new planet, a wildlife volunteer measuring eelgrass shoots in waders that came too big. No mention of family, not even my name in the caption. I read it twice and then once again for the verbs. They were the honest kind. Fund, teach, restore. In the comments, the usual reactor chemistry occurred. Praise and suspicion, curiosity and contempt. But substance began to hold its own weight. The thing about work is that it photographs differently than grievance. The studio smelled of damp clay and hot dust. I spent the last light of day there, sleeves rolled, hands in the slip, helping a man my age steady a bowl that wanted to forget it was round. The wheel hummed like a patient machine listening for your patience in return. I'm starting over, he said, not smiling. Good, I said. Clay likes beginners. He nodded as if I'd told him a weather report he could use. The kiln ticked as it cooled. Small metal applause for people who stayed. Work, not noise, is the only counter that ages well. Back home, Tara's team sent an archived digest, links captured, hashes generated, duplicates stored off-network. They flagged 3 statements as potentially actionable if we needed to move. It felt like laying out dry clothes before a storm ever admits it's coming. On the Foundation site, the update held its ground. Engagement on the smear leveled. A few big accounts moved on to newer outrage. Attention is a tide with somewhere else to be. I opened my notebook and wrote one line. Do not let strangers script the ending. Below it, I copied the mercy clause verbatim. 12 months of basic health insurance if they comply. It stayed. Their smear didn't evict it. Policy beats weather. I closed the book and slid it beneath the 4 folders, now resting like instruments after a performance. I turned off the kitchen light and the room agreed to be a room again. Night met the studio windows like black felt. On the shelves, bowls dried toward the future. The kiln exhaled its last heat. I pocketed the next month's class schedule and stepped into mist that turned street lamps to planets. Somewhere beyond the hill, the sound carried a freighter in the quiet industry of destination. I walked to the car and didn't check my phone. The story would be waiting in the morning, but work would be waiting too. One of them had to define the other. I had already chosen which. Seattle woke in its usual gray, a clean kind that makes edges honest. I opened the desk, closed the 4 blue folders, and drew a new legal pad toward me. On the top line, I wrote "long game" and pressed the pen until the downstroke looked like a small decision. The room held only the sounds a house makes when it remembers to keep people. The smear cycle had slowed to a tired metronome. Systems could begin. At Tara's office, we worked under a whiteboard where the day had been reduced to nouns. Escrow triggers, monitoring cadence, no contact protocol. Evidence life cycle, foundation governance. Bullet points grew spines. We defined what counted as a breach, who had authority to flip the switch, how a 24/7 chain line would pick up on the third ring. Calendar invites stacked into quarters, a 90-day review, a 180-day audit, a standing legal check-in that would arrive whether I liked it or not. Procedure protects you from your moods, Tara said. Good, I told her. The estate instruments followed. A new will, a clean codicil, designations that left no room for clairvoyance. Evan and Maya reduced to 0 in the math that matters, philanthropic bequests clarified so that accountants could nod without looking up. Powers of attorney and health directives were reissued with authentication that could not be forged by ambition with a steady hand. Bank beneficiaries aligned, stray forms revoked, letters mailed with that particular firmness registered envelopes know how to wear. The stack in the outbox looked like work finished on purpose. We widened the foundation's bones. I would chair a 3-person board until the work learned to stand without me. An arts educator and a marine biologist agreed to serve after hearing sentences that did not ask for applause. An investment policy statement set a conservative glide path and a reporting rhythm that would feel like seatbelts rather than shackles. Conflict of interest forms were signed with no drama. A grant calendar took shape. Biannual microgrants for artists, seasonal wildlife microgrants, scholarships pairing seniors with teenagers at the wheel. Vendor policies came last. No exclusive rights to personal effects, strict provenance ethics, the sort of language you write when you have seen what happens without it. Paperwork turned to rooms. At the community pottery studio, we added lower wheels, better lighting, and a handrail near the glazed sink where the floor stays honest. 2 instructors signed on with the sort of handshake that still means schedule and not stardom. On Bainbridge, a field partner inked an MOU for eelgrass and shorebird monitoring. Waiters, calipers, and data loggers were staged to ship in boxes that smelled like intention. Even the labels looked like they wanted to go somewhere useful. Security shifted from worry to hygiene. A crew walked my house line by line, camera angles corrected, lights put on timers that understood dusk. A mailbox hold protocol for when I traveled. At the clinic, accounts were reset with multi-factor and alerts on any lookup of my file. The way a museum wires a frame that knows it's painting. My digital life took a bath. Password manager installed, backups duplicated to an off-site drive that would outlast a distracted afternoon. Health needed to be a policy too. I saw primary care and the cardiologist who prefers facts to sermons. We built a plan so simple it could survive a bad week. Walking that fails to impress anyone, bowls to center at the studio, sleep that arrives by habit rather than fatigue. I registered for a grief and resilience circle without speeches. People sat in chairs and told the truth without trying to sell it. Communication became field notes. The foundation would publish a monthly page that read like work. A student quote from the studio, a photograph of a bowl drying in patience, a 2-sentence eelgrass update with a map dot. No mention of family, no reply to strangers who ask for theater. We invited a short list of local press to a studio open day with no microphone and no Q&A. Clay and data would speak their languages. When Evan sent a terse email about paperwork left in the garage, the protocol moved without mood. Tara replied on letterhead. A neutral courier inventoried boxes, photographed contents, returned a receipt. There was no doorstep scene, no conversation to later misremember. Boundaries worked best when they required no heroism. At home, I inventoried June's ceramics. I made a small catalog at the dining table, nothing grand, photographs, dates where I had them, notes in the margin about a glaze she chased, or a thumbprint she loved for being slightly wrong. I decided on a quiet, rotating exhibit inside the foundation office, a shelf and a plaque about process and community, not price. Memory would be honored with access, not liquidation. I cleaned each piece with the gentleness that comes when you know the hand that made it won't return. By week's end, Tara's team sent a dashboard. The smear curve had flattened to the kind of line that makes analysts yawn. The archive was complete with hashes and dates. No trigger was needed. Escrow slept with one eye open the way good systems do. Relief arrived without celebration. Maintenance isn't glamorous, but it lets tomorrow happen. I wrote one sentence in the notebook and underlined it twice. Make good that outlives attention. Then I filed the 4 blue folders onto the safe's middle shelf under a label that read, Completed Actions, and opened a new one. Foundation, Year 1. The plastic of the tab cracked into place with a tiny sound I found more satisfying than anyone intends. Evening sent warm air up from the kiln. I pinned the Year 1 grants calendar to a corkboard near the studio door and checked dates the way a person checks the tide table before trusting a harbor. Students cleaned wheels, laughter small and local. Outside, the sound turned glassy and held a ferry steady in the sort of frame painters try to fake. A horn drew a horizon line simple enough to keep. I locked up and walked to the car without looking for my reflection in the window. Systems were built. The river could carry them now. 3 months later, the kiln heat met the smell of fresh paint and the room felt like a lung just after a deep breath. String lights stitched a soft ceiling over the foundation-supported exhibition, and shelves along the walls held bowls that still remembered hands. A fan moved warm air in a patient circle. People spoke the way water speaks to a shore, low, continuous, earnestly unconcerned with being heard beyond the next step. I arrived early enough to read the program twice and tuck it into my pocket like a small promise. Outside, Puget Sound smoothed itself into evening. Inside, glazed samples caught the light and made quiet arguments for blue. The plaques under each piece were factual and short. Name, process note, a line about how a microgrant turned intention into clay. Fingerprints had been left in 1 or 2 places on purpose, material proof that perfection was never the assignment. An elderly student in a linen shirt cupped a mug in both hands as if it could teach his palms something about weight. A teenager traced their name on a placard with a fingertip and then took a picture of the proof. I felt the steadiness that comes when rooms decide they will be useful. I did not give remarks. That was policy. The arts educator on our board, who could talk about centering clay without ever using the word transcend, welcomed people in 3 paragraphs of good nouns and no biography. She thanked the volunteers, nodded toward the wildlife table in the corner, and reminded everyone to touch with eyes. Applause arrived like a well-behaved tide and went out the same way. I stood near the back and watched the work make its case. It did not need me in the frame to speak. A young artist with clay still under her nails stopped at a low shelf where a shallow bowl held a horizon of celadon. "It's about useful beauty," she said, not to me at first, but to the space between us. "Something you can hold that still does its job." When she turned, I nodded. "June would have liked that," I said. The sentence carried no exposition. It didn't need to. She smiled with the relief of someone whose intent had been understood without being translated. We stood another moment and let the glaze finish cooling in our eyes. Across the room, a small display about the eelgrass and shorebird project held maps, laminated data sheets, and a pair of waders on a rack that looked like it could carry a winter. 2 volunteers pointed to a chart with dots that drifted upward at a pace only patient people celebrate. "We counted at dawn," one of them said. The bay was flat as a page. The numbers and the bowls belonged in the same evening. Both were forms of making the world slightly more fit for staying. I touched the edge of the map and felt the particular comfort of measurements that will be made again tomorrow. June's ceramics lived in a corner that refused to be a shrine. A docent had written short plaques about process instead of provenance. Why she liked a certain iron in the clay body, what a slow cool does to a blue, how a thumb can be a signature. I didn't touch the pieces, only the air around them, which is sometimes the right way to mark that something matters. The ache that had initially risen when we cataloged these at the dining table had thinned into something closer to gratitude. She wasn't for sale. She was present. My phone hummed earlier that afternoon with a text from Tara, no breaches detected, escrow dormant, quarterly review set, governance minutes filed, bank proofs received. It read like weather suitable for an outdoor table. I replied with a thumbs-up emoji I still use like a telegram, then locked the screen and put my hand around the paper program instead. The separation stayed intact without theater. That was the goal and the relief. The absent sat in the room without introduction. There was no Evan at the doorway, no Maya composing a frame out of other people's craft. I did not spend time naming the sensation. Boundaries held and mercy remained a policy, waiting in its claws if they continued to obey it. I declined to furnish the narrative of their consequences. That too was a boundary. My attention belonged here, glaze, breath, a mug handle shaped for a hand that needed a little kindness from an object. A local reporter moved like a considerate heron. 2 photographs near the wildlife table, one of a senior teen pair cleaning a wheel. Just captions about grants and classes, she said. I nodded. The lens caught the right things. Data loggers coiled like serpents that only measure, a damp rag wrung from work, a shelf of bowls that would dry into usefulness. The story will read on a small page tomorrow morning and sit between ads for hardware and sandwiches. That suits me. Later at my desk, I wrote an inventory in the notebook that keeps the facts from drifting. Board names, monthly field notes scheduled, budgets passed, my next cardiology appointment, walking routes I take when the tide is indecisive. Attention had passed like a weather front. Good, when built into a system, did not notice. I closed the book and let the page retain the warmth of my hand a moment longer than necessary. Then I shelved it under year 1 and let it join the ordinary. Before leaving the gallery, I stood in front of June's plaque and thanked her without moving my mouth. A teenager stepped into my space to read. I stepped aside and became part of the room's furniture, which was the right rank for the night. Somewhere a kiln timer beeped, the gentle authority of a process that will not be rushed and cannot be cheated. The foundation calendar in my pocket crackled when I shifted. I pressed it flat and walked toward the door. Outside, the air had cooled into its best self and the sound held a ferry exactly where it was supposed to be. A horn drew a single, strict line across the water and said, "Go on." I put the folded program in my jacket and started toward the car. The evening had done what evenings should do. Work had been made visible. Memory had been kept public without being spent. The door closed softly behind me and stayed closed for all the right reasons. Morning came in the color Seattle uses when it wants you to pay attention. Steam ribboned from the kettle and fogged the lower corner of the window before the glass took itself back. I laid the folded year 1 program beside my notebook, the paper still warm from last night's pocket. The house felt restored to its original function, a place for quiet work. I poured tea not as a ritual of forgetting, but as a way to keep my hands from mistaking stillness for idleness. Outside, Puget Sound wore its pale suit. A ferry eased across as if calendars were just a courtesy. In the ledger of what I've learned, revenge is an accelerant with a small tank. It burns hot enough to make you feel decisive and then leaves you staring at a road with nothing on it. Purpose is a grid, unshowy, dependable, interested in voltage, not sparks. I wanted sparks in the first hours after the whisper in Post Alley. Then the lab report arrived, the still frame of a vial kissed a glass, and a system began to take shape. Evidence before speech, procedure before opinion. Mercy as a policy, not a feeling. The sequence was not dramatic, which is why it worked. Legacy changed its name while I wasn't looking. For years I had confused it with access, a backstage pass you laminate for an heir and call love. It turned out to be proof that outlives attention, grants that clear, classes that run. Eelgrass counted at dawn because the tide keeps appointments whether anyone mentions it online. Money became a tool exactly when it left the inheritance storyline and entered an endowment with a board and a budget. I did not stop being a father. I stopped pretending that biology is governance. Dignity turned out to be a method. The napkin folded into a pocket, the body cam lodged under seal, the escrow instructions written in plain daylight. These were not clever maneuvers, just decisions to let paper carry weight so I didn't have to. No contact wasn't a punishment. It was a fence that kept the garden from becoming a parking lot. Restraint saved more than my name. It kept June's from being printed where it didn't belong. I had wanted once to call out every injustice in the voice a man uses when he finally admits how tired he is. Instead, I let 4 blue folders do the talking in a room built for contracts, not catharsis. The cost has its own honesty. A son gone is not an accounting entry you can balance with scholarships, and no calendar can make a page for the day you stop rehearsing the better version of the future. Grief gets a chair here, the one near the window, but not the table. It speaks in short sentences when the kettle clicks off and the house is a church again. What remains is work, a heartbeat with less swagger, a walk I know so well I can do it without glancing at the water, and June's presence relocated from price to process. Bowls that teach hands without needing to be sold. I packed 2 envelopes with a care that would have made June grin. The first held artist micro-grant notifications, 3 paragraphs each and a small instruction about receipts. The second held wildlife stipends and a laminated card with the tide table circled in pencil. I sealed them, pressed the seams flat, and walked them down the block. The blue mailbox took the letters like a good instrument takes breath. Without fuss, with promise. Legacy, it turns out, is something you mail. A clause remains, small and made of mercy. 12 months of basic health insurance will continue to be available if they comply. Not because they earned it, and not because I am generous today, but because it sits in the rule book with the other systems that kept us from burning down more than the problem required. I do not look for reasons to revoke it, and I do not look for reasons to extend it. It exists exactly as written. Policy beats weather. On the walk back, the city offered me a sequence of unspectacular kindnesses. A neighbor's dog leaning into my knee like we had an old agreement. A barista who knows I don't need a lid, a senior from class crossing with a sleeve dusted in clay, and a wave that said both thanks and see you. These were not omens. They were what happens when people keep doing what they've decided to do. I let the ordinary collect and didn't try to make it symbolic. It is enough that it accumulates. At the kitchen table, I opened the notebook to a fresh page and wrote a letter to June. I had no intention of sending anywhere but forward. I thanked her for teaching me that useful beauty is a form of ethics. I reported on the money as if she were aboard. The class is full, the eelgrass rising in dots that please measured people, the board now 3, the books clean. I described the small exhibit that uses her bowls to explain process to strangers. I didn't write about the severance. She knew the difference between a story and a record. When I finished, I dated the page and closed the cover with a palm that stayed there a second longer than necessary. If there's a twist to the tale, it's not a reveal but a change in weather. This was never a war won. It was weather endured. We diverted the runoff into irrigation and let it find fields that could drink without drowning. Systems are an unglamorous miracle. You wind them and they keep a beat even on days you'd rather go back to bed. The sound they make is not applause. It's continuity. The calendar chimed 3 small notes: quarterly review with Tara, cardiology follow-up, next month's roster for seniors paired with teens. I put the reminders in their places and pulled a new binder from the shelf. Year 2, the tab cracked into its ring with the hopeful click that cheap plastic offers to serious people. The 4 blue folders stayed in the safe. They are part of the record now, not the day. I stood at the window with a mug from the studio, the lip sanded smooth by someone who thought about hands. The ferry pushed a clean line across the sound and drew me a horizon I could keep. I drank, not to forget, but to continue. Somewhere in the house, the kettle cooled with a soft tick, and the program from last night rested beside the notebook like a ticket you don't have to surrender. I placed my palm on the cover, felt paper accept a small proof of life, and let the room go quiet the way rooms do when work is waiting and no one needs to be convinced. In the end, a truth as old as tide rises quietly. Revenge is a spark, purpose is a current. Sparks thrill, then vanish. Currents move harbors, carry ferries, irrigate fields, and accept no applause. When a life is split open by betrayal, the first instinct is to swing at the shadow that swung first. But the deeper lesson asks for steadier hands. Let the anger cool into proof. Let the noise thin into decisions. Trade the hunger to be right for the discipline to do right. Justice that endures rarely announces itself. It submits evidence and keeps working. It also asks us to redefine wealth. A legacy worth keeping is not a trophy on a mantle or a vault someone waits to inherit. It is the daily proof that goodness can be engineered on purpose. It looks like systems that protect the vulnerable from impulse, clear governance, quiet audits, rules that do not bend for mood. It looks like resources redirected from spectacle into sustenance, arts that put clay back in trembling hands, science that kneels by cold water and counts what wants to live. It looks like policies that favor patience over fire, and endowments that fund work long after attention has moved on. Built this way, legacy stops being a promise and becomes a practice. There are days when grief will still arrive early, sit at the table and ask unanswerable questions. Let it sit, but do not let it chair the meeting. Do the ordinary things that carry a future. Sharpen pencils, label folders, keep appointments, walk familiar routes, learn the names of tides. Build a practice of attention that owes nothing to outrage. When the world invites you to perform your wounds for a crowd, decline. Instead, keep faith with the slow, verifiable labors that turn harm into capacity. Tell the truth with records. Let dignity be the method that steers power without spilling it. Boundaries deserve a kind word too. They are not punishments, they are fences that protect gardens from becoming parking lots. A clean, no-contact line, a sober escrow, a modest policy about what gets said and what gets done, these look small on paper and feel immense in a life. Used properly, they keep stories from collapsing into noise and shepherd energy toward the work that matters. Mercy belongs here as policy, not mood, measured, written, available, and never confused with permission. If anything is proved by the long arc, it is that attention is fickle and goodness is durable. Attention surges, declares, forgets, moves on. Goodness clocks in again tomorrow. It does not require a lens to exist. It appreciates the witness, then keeps building whether anyone notices or not. This, perhaps, is the deepest promise. What is built for others does not depend on the temperature of our feelings today. It depends on showing up even when applause has wandered elsewhere. So hold fast to what steadies you. Keep the records. Thank the quiet professionals. Repair what can be repaired and release what cannot, without making a monument to either. Let useful beauty find your hands, the bowl that serves, the habitat that heals, the ledger that balances without drama. Measure what is alive and help it stay that way. And when the wind rises, remember, the point is not to win the weather, but to turn it toward water for fields that need it. If this story met you at a sore place and left you with a steadier one, we're grateful you stayed for the whole arc. Your reflections matter here. Tell us, which moment shifted your view? Proof before speech, boundaries as care, or the quiet turn from revenge to purpose? What would you build right where you are if you chose systems over spectacle? Share your thoughts in the comments so others can borrow your courage. If you're new to this community, subscribe and turn on notifications. Each week we bring stories of resolve, repair, and the quiet architectures that outlast noise. Add your voice, mark the moment that moved you, and pass the lesson forward. Thank you for watching, for thinking slowly with us, and for trusting stories that choose work over fury. Take a breath, look around, and when you're ready, pick one practical act that moves goodness forward today. Small, steady, verifiable. We'll be here the next time you need a reminder that storms can be turned into irrigation and that purpose, once planted, knows how to grow without cameras.